What if the end of the world has already been written? Not once, but 3 times. And what if all 3 versions of that final chapter are destined to collide on a single, sacred patch of earth? In the heart of Jerusalem, an invisible line exists. It is not drawn on any map, yet it is more brutal and more permanent than any wall of stone. On one side, devout Jews press their foreheads to the ancient Western Wall. Their whispers, a 2,000-year-old prayer for a Messiah who has not yet come. On the other, Christian pilgrims trace the sorrowful path of a man they call the Son of God, their hymns rising to meet the call to prayer from the minarets that tower over the city, a sound that 5 times a day declares, "There is no God but God." 3 faiths, born from the same desert patriarch, Abraham. 3 peoples who all worship the God of Moses. So why has their shared ancestry produced the longest and most blood-soaked family feud in human history? Why is Jesus of Nazareth, arguably the most influential figure to ever walk the earth, so profoundly rejected by the very people he was born from, and reinterpreted so radically by the faith that followed? Today, we are not just talking about faith. We are peeling back the layers of political ambition, shattered expectations, and archaeological warfare to understand why, in the city of peace, peace itself remains the ultimate heresy. Prepare yourself. The truth of this story may shake the foundations of everything you thought you knew. To comprehend this great refusal, we must travel back in time. 2 millennia ago, the land of Judea groans under the iron heel of the Roman Empire. Its people are suffocated by foreign taxes, their culture threatened by pagan idols, their holy sites patrolled by legionaries. In this pressure cooker of desperation, the Jewish people were not waiting for a sermon on loving their enemy. They were praying for a savior, a hero. Their sacred scriptures, the prophecies passed down through generations, painted a very specific picture of the coming Messiah. He was not to be a humble teacher of parables. He was to be a warrior king, a descendant of David, a political and military genius who would unite the scattered tribes of Israel and drive the Roman eagles back into the sea. This Messiah would rebuild the sacred temple in Jerusalem to its former glory, and, through his divine authority and righteous power, usher in an era of global peace under God's law. They were waiting for a lion, and then Jesus of Nazareth appeared. He was a lamb. He performed miracles. He spoke of a kingdom, but it was a kingdom not of this world. He offered no strategy to overthrow Caesar. He built no temple of stone and mortar. Instead, he spoke of a temple within the human heart. And in the end, he did not conquer his enemies. He was arrested, humiliated, and executed by them on a criminal's cross. For the Jewish people of that era, a Messiah who was beaten, tortured, and shamefully killed was more than a disappointment. It was a theological absurdity, a contradiction in terms. How could a man who could not save himself possibly save the entire nation of Israel? This conflict wasn't just political. It struck at the very core of their theology. For Judaism, one principle is absolute, the bedrock of their existence. God is one, and he is singular, indivisible, without physical form, and he never, ever becomes a man. The daily prayer, the Shema Yisrael, affirms this: "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." So when this carpenter from Nazareth declared, "I and the Father are one," to the Sanhedrin, the council of high priests, it wasn't a theological debate. It was the ultimate blasphemy, an unforgivable insult to the God they had dedicated their lives to protecting. Imagine the fury of men who had spent their entire existence studying and preserving ancient laws, only to be confronted by a young preacher who claimed he had the authority to amend them. His death on the hill of Golgotha didn't end the matter. It was merely the beginning of a 2,000-year-old schism, a fault line that cracked the world of faith in two, transforming Jesus into the great dividing line of humanity. This initial rejection was not a simple religious disagreement. It was a collision between the desperate hope for a visible, powerful, earthly kingdom and the shocking reality of a humble spiritual one. From here, a fracture formed, and over the centuries, it would only widen, swallowing the peace of countless generations to come. The dust had barely settled on the ruins of the Second Temple when, 600 years after the life of Jesus, a new voice echoed from the sun-scorched dunes of the Arabian desert. The arrival of Islam brought with it a perspective on Jesus, or Isa, as he is known in Arabic, that was both intimately familiar and profoundly alien. What is stunning to many in the Christian world is the deep and unwavering reverence the Quran holds for him. Jesus is no stranger in the house of Islam. In fact, he is mentioned by name in their holy book more times than the Prophet Muhammad himself. Islam affirms his virgin birth, a miracle bestowed upon his mother, Mary, who has an entire chapter of the Quran named after her. It acknowledges his miracles, healing the blind, curing lepers, and even raising the dead, all by the will of God. And yet, at the very peak of this veneration, a hard, uncrossable theological line is drawn. It sets the two faiths on parallel paths that can never, ever intersect. In the Islamic creed, God, Allah, is utterly unique and absolute. The concept of Tawhid, or the indivisible oneness of God, is the central pillar of the faith. He begets not, nor is he begotten, the Quran declares. To call Jesus the Son of God is, from an Islamic perspective, a grave error. It is seen as diminishing the transcendent majesty of the Creator, of associating a human partner with the divine. He is a beloved messenger, one of the greatest prophets, but he is a man. But the greatest mystery, the one that directly negates the foundational event of Christianity, is the Islamic account of his death. Islam teaches that Jesus was never actually crucified. The Quran states that in the final moments, God intervened, raising Jesus up to heaven. The man who suffered that humiliating punishment on the cross was merely a substitute, someone made to look like him. His enemies were deceived. If the death and resurrection of Christ is the very soul of Christianity, the ultimate sacrifice for the sins of humanity, then this denial is a blade that severs any possibility of doctrinal harmony. One faith worships the sacrifice on the cross as the key to salvation. The other reveres Jesus as a great prophet, whom God honored by protecting him from the indignity of such a death. These profound contradictions, these irreconcilable beliefs, refuse to remain dormant on the ancient pages of Scripture. Instead, they converged, like volatile chemicals, and detonated at a single point on the map: the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Here, geography and theology bleed into one another in a way that is simply breathtaking. It is a holy site, but it is also a crime scene of history, a graveyard of empires, a stage for an unending drama. There is a single rock here, the foundation stone. But in this one stone, 3 separate destinies of mankind are written. For the Jewish people, this is Mount Moriah, the hallowed ground where Abraham, as a test of faith, prepared to sacrifice his son Isaac. It is the location of their first and second temples, the cosmic center of their universe, the place where God's presence was said to dwell on earth. For Muslims, this same rock is where their prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven during his miraculous night journey, the third holiest site in their entire faith. When the magnificent dome of the rock, with its shimmering golden dome, was constructed directly on the foundations of the ancient Jewish temple, it transformed this sacred space into a permanent trigger for historical conflict. It became a statement in stone, a superposition of one narrative directly on top of another. Every square meter of this plateau is saturated with competing prophecies, making Jerusalem not just a city, but a battlefield of souls. This volatile intersection of faith and land finally ignited in the 11th century. The fuse had been lit. At the call of the Pope and the Christian powers of Europe, tens of thousands of knights and soldiers embarked on the Crusades. Their stated ultimate purpose: to liberate the Holy Land from Muslim rule. But beneath the shining armor and the banners of the cross lay a brutal reality, a campaign of conquest that would carve scars into the psyche of the Muslim and Jewish worlds that have never healed. When the Crusader armies breached the walls of Jerusalem in the year 1099, what followed was not a peaceful liberation. It was a horrific, indiscriminate slaughter. Chronicles from the time, written by both Christians and Muslims, describe blood running ankle-deep through the ancient streets. The victims were not just soldiers, but thousands of Muslim men, women, and children, and the city's Jewish inhabitants who were burned alive in their synagogue. These events marked a dark and irreversible turning point. For the Muslim world, the Crusaders were not holy warriors. They were barbaric invaders who desecrated their sacred sites and massacred their people. The memory of this violence was passed down through generations, breeding a deep-up and abiding suspicion of any future Western intervention. Meanwhile, the Jewish people, who had already suffered persecution and exile for centuries, were once again caught in the crossfire, victims of a war between two colossal religious empires. The conflict was no longer a debate over who was the true Messiah. It had become a war of survival, where the name of God was twisted and abused to sanctify the annihilation of the other. These wounds of the past continued to fester as history marched into the modern age. Jerusalem was no longer just a place. It had become the ultimate symbol of national pride and religious identity. Empires rose and fell. Byzantines, Arabs, Crusaders, Mamluks, Ottomans, British, each leaving their mark, each trying to erase or build over the legacy of the last. The layers of history here are piled one on top of the other, like thin sheets of ice, ready to shatter under the slightest pressure. The hatred was no longer confined to holy books. It had seeped into the very stones of the city, waiting for a new pretext to erupt in a fiercer, more modern form. After centuries of simmering conflict, the 20th century witnessed a geopolitical earthquake that would permanently alter the face of the Holy Land. The year was 1948. The modern state of Israel was born. For the Jewish people, rising from the ashes of the Holocaust, this was not merely a political victory. It was a resurrection. The fulfillment of a nearly 2,000-year-old dream to return to their ancestral homeland after an agonizing exile. They saw in it the hand of God, the tangible proof of ancient prophecies coming true. But for the millions of Arabs who had lived on that land for over 13 centuries, this same event was the beginning of a profound tragedy. They call it Al-Nakba, the catastrophe. The conflict was no longer contained within the walls of synagogues and mosques. It spilled onto the streets, erupting into forced migrations, brutal wars, and a cycle of violence that continues to this day. The Jewish claim was based on ancient history, archaeological evidence, and a spiritual connection stretching back millennia. The Palestinian claim was based on continuous presence, on generations of families who had cultivated the land and called it home. Two competing, seemingly legitimate narratives of ownership laid over a tiny sliver of land, but they were mutually exclusive. And Jerusalem, once again, became the epicenter of the storm. Every inch of soil was now weighted with the gravity of national survival and ethnic pride. Checkpoints, Barricades and concrete separation walls began to rise. They did not just divide geography, they carved deep into the souls of people who had once been neighbors. The bloodshed became ever more complex as it ceased to be a local affair. Jerusalem and the wider Middle East became a grand chessboard for global superpowers. Geopolitics, oil, and international influence poured into the vacuum. Each side sought powerful allies, transforming a regional religious dispute into a proxy for global confrontations. The intervention of outside forces, often under the guise of peacemaking, but driven by strategic interests, only made the vortex of hatred more difficult to escape. The most advanced weapons in the world were now being tested on the soil people still called holy. And so the blood continued to flow, shed to protect values that both sides believed God had ordained for them, and for them alone. Even more terrifying than the guns and the concrete walls was the rise of extremism within the heart of each faith. When spiritual belief is hijacked and distorted to serve a political agenda, it becomes an uncontrollable weapon. In the psychology of a crowd, when people believe they are fighting for a divine mandate from God Himself, the fear of death vanishes. It is replaced by a yearning for martyrdom, seen as the highest honor. In this land, you hear terms like jihad and holy war and messianic mission used to turn young, impressionable minds into instruments of violence. When faith is radicalized, the enemy is no longer seen as a human being with a family, with memories, with dreams. They become a mere obstacle, a spiritual impurity that must be cleansed to clear the path for God's kingdom. But there is another, deeper force at play, one rarely dissected by mainstream media: the terrifying, manipulative power of apocalyptic prophecy. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all possess their own detailed, end-of-days scenarios. And chillingly, they all culminate in a final, cataclysmic battle right here, in this very region. Orthodox Jews await the arrival of their true Messiah, who will rebuild a third temple on the Temple Mount. Muslims await the coming of the Imam Mahdi, who will fight against the forces of a false Messiah. And a significant portion of evangelical Christians, particularly in the United States, believe that the return of the Jewish people to Israel and the ensuing conflicts in Jerusalem are necessary preconditions for the second coming of Jesus Christ. The terrible, tragic irony is that all of these scripts lead to the same final scene: Armageddon. This belief in a predetermined, violent destiny can create a dangerous apathy towards peace. Worse, it can incentivize provocation. Some actors, consciously or unconsciously, push for conflict, believing they are helping to fulfill prophecy, to hasten the final act of God's divine play. When a politician or a religious leader makes a decision, their goal may not be stability in the present, but the completion of a chapter written in a holy book thousands of years ago. This weaponization of eschatology has turned Jerusalem into a colossal stage, where each faction is desperately trying to play its destined role in an apocalyptic drama they believe is inevitable. The heartbreaking truth is that when people become too focused on the kingdom of heaven in the future, they become terrifyingly willing to turn the earth into a living hell in the present. The conflict has been internationalized. The religious blood feud is now fueled by a global arms race and strategic calculations over energy resources. Jerusalem, whose name means City of Peace, has become, by a cruel twist of fate, the arena where world powers flex their muscles and test their influence, turning the deepest beliefs of human beings into poker chips on a geopolitical table, where, in the end, no one truly wins. But beyond the grand strategies of empires, the most painful reality of this war is how it shapes the souls of the next generation. In a land where air raid sirens and explosions have become part of the rhythm of daily life. Hatred is no longer an abstract concept from a history book. It is a survival instinct. When a child grows up seeing the pain of their parents, the loss of their relatives, the rubble of their home, the seeds of outrage are planted automatically. No indoctrination is needed. For the young people in Jerusalem, in Gaza, in the West Bank settlements, their very identity is often forged in opposition to the other on the far side of the wall. They define themselves by what they defend and who they fight. This transforms the cycle of retribution into a wheel with no brakes. This hatred is then nurtured by educational systems and media narratives on both sides. When each side tells only the story of its own suffering and the brutality of its enemy, they inadvertently strip the future generation of the capacity for empathy. History books written in blood have little room for nuance or forgiveness. Young people are not taught how to build bridges. They are armed with arguments to reinforce the walls. They are raised to believe that peace can only come through total victory or through the final divine triumph of their own faith script. This zero-sum mentality turns every attempt at dialogue into a hopeless negotiation, where compromise is seen as a betrayal of the martyrs who have already fallen. And yet, even in the deepest shadows of this inherited hatred, there are quiet, courageous efforts to find a way out. There are fathers and mothers, Israeli and Palestinian, who have lost children to the violence, who now stand together, holding hands, to call for reconciliation. They understand, with a clarity born of unimaginable pain, that if this cycle does not stop, their grandchildren will also be consumed by the flames their ancestors lit. But these voices of peace are too often drowned out by the roar of extremist politicians and the preachers who invoke God's name to sanctify violence. The twisted paradox is that here, in the place where the name of God is spoken more than any other, the core message of mercy found in all three religions is the most frequently forgotten. The holy war, then, is not just between nations. It is a war within every human soul caught in this tragic orbit. A war between the universal desire to live in peace and the crushing weight of a 1,000-year inheritance of hate. Our journey through the geological strata of faith and the dust of history has led us to one unavoidable truth. Jerusalem is not just a city of stone and light. It is a mirror reflecting humanity's most divine aspirations and its most depraved, tribal instincts. We have seen a Jesus rejected by his own people because he did not fit their script of political power. We have seen a prophet revered in the Quran, yet stripped of his divinity to protect the absolute oneness of God. And we have seen the blood of millions spilled to declare, "This rock is mine. This prophecy is for my people." But after all the crusades, all the jihads, all the geopolitical maneuvering, the land itself remains. Silent, stern, a timeless rebuke to the fleeting arrogance of man. The most painful irony of all is that Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all trace their lineage to Abraham, the patriarch who taught hospitality to strangers and absolute faith in God. All three worship a God of mercy and justice. And yet, it is in his name that the highest walls have been built and the deepest trenches of division have been dug. If we continue to cling to apocalyptic scripts to justify our destruction in the present, we are not fulfilling God's will. We are merely writing our own tragic ending. Peace in this land will not be built by treaties on paper or enforced by the barrel of a gun. It can only begin when one human being has the courage to look into the eyes of their sworn enemy and see not a monster, not a demon, but a reflection of their own humanity. This film has no ambition to solve a conflict of millennia. It hopes only to open a door for understanding in a world being torn apart by absolutes. When you understand why a Jewish person clings so fiercely to their ancestral claim, why a Muslim will defend their holy sites to the death, and why a Christian sees this land as the very cradle of their salvation, you begin to see that the pain on all sides is the same, and the yearning for a land of peace is the same too. Truth does not fear being questioned. It only fears being forgotten in the deafening noise of blind hatred. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If the ideas and emotions in this film have resonated with you, please help spread this message by sharing it. Leave a comment with your thoughts. Can we find common ground between these great faiths? Or is this cycle of conflict a destiny that cannot be escaped? Subscribe for more explorations into the great historical and religious codes of humanity. Our journey to the source of this ancient blood feud ends here, but your dialogue with the truth has only just begun.